Hello, this is Professor James Strickler. This is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 5, the Executive Branch. It's Lesson 8, about the Electoral College. In this lesson, you'll learn about the qualifications necessary for someone to be president. You'll learn what the Electoral College is. You'll learn what electors are. And you'll learn about winning the Electoral College. So let's begin with a question. Who may be chosen as President of the United States? The United States Constitution in Article 2 sets out some basic requirements for a person to be president. You can see them highlighted here in the text of Article 2. The first of these qualifications is that the person be a natural-born citizen. What this means is that at the moment of birth, this person is a citizen of the United States. In other words, they did not become a citizen of the United States at some point later in their lives. Now, how is a person a citizen of the United States at the time that they are born? Well, generally speaking, that's the case when a person is born within the boundaries of the United States of America, or they are born to a citizen of the United States who is outside the United States at that time, perhaps living in another country, traveling on a trip, serving in the military, whatever it is. If they're a U.S. citizen and they give birth abroad, their child will be a U.S. citizen. But even non-U.S. citizens, if they give birth within the United States, their child that's born here is considered a natural-born citizen. The second qualification mentioned in the Constitution is that a person must be at least 35 years old to be President of the United States. As we mentioned before, as we talked about these age requirements in the Constitution in the case of the House of Representatives in the United States Senate, 35 years old meant something a little different back over 200 years ago. This is a person probably well past middle age for most people in that society. So we, as the way things have turned out in our country's history, we've never had a president who was actually close to 35 in age. They've all been considerably older than that. The third presidential requirement laid out in the Constitution is that a person must be at least 14 years a resident of the United States. In other words, a person who was perhaps born to an American mother living abroad has to at some point come back and live in the United States so that they can meet this 14-year period of residency before they could run for president. Now that we've figured out who is eligible to be president, the next thing to discuss is how that person is actually chosen to be president. The United States Constitution in Article 2 lays out a very complicated process for choosing our president. It says that the states of the United States will appoint people who are called electors, and those electors will then vote for President of the United States. So it's electors who choose our president for us. And they do it collectively through what is called the Electoral College. Now, this may seem a little bit odd because people living in the United States of America just sort of naturally absorb this idea that every 4 years an election is held, the common people of the country then go out and vote, and their votes choose the President of the United States. But that's not what actually happens. As I'll explain in this lesson and the next lesson to come, those votes counted on election day are not actually for President of the United States. The only people who actually vote for President of the United States are these electors who serve in the Electoral College. Now, you may ask, why do we even have a popular vote if it's somebody else choosing the president? That'll all eventually get explained in the next lesson. But for right now, let's just think about the Electoral College as it's described in the Constitution. The goal of the Electoral College is to elect the president. The president is chosen by these electors that we've just talked about. And according to the Constitution, these electors are chosen by state legislatures. And then it's the state legislatures that are chosen by the voters of the state. So now notice this process, what it's done. It has separated the people, those masses of voters that are out voting on election day, 3 steps from the president. The voters choose their state government officials. Their state government officials then choose these electors. We'll talk more about who these electors really are. And then these electors choose the President of the United States. Why would the Founding Fathers set up a system like this? Why would they have electors choosing the president rather than the voters choosing the president? Well, one reason is explained here in this quote from Alexander Hamilton, one of the Founding Fathers who was at the Constitutional Convention. He described the Electoral College as being a way for the men who are most capable of analyzing the qualities needed to be a president being entrusted with making that decision. He said because they would have the information and discernment that would be needed to figure out who the best person would be to be president of the United States. So when you think about that's who they were trying to set this system up to be in place to pick our president, then you realize why they wanted to do this. The Founding Fathers believed that the general people of the country were too ignorant. Now, what I mean by ignorant is what the word really means. Some people use the word incorrectly to mean rude. What it actually means is that somebody lacks knowledge about something. So the founders thought that the general population of the country would lack sufficient knowledge of the potential candidates to wisely choose a president. For that reason, we would need this electoral college, with these electors chosen by state governments, who are hopefully old wise men of the state, to then choose our president for us. This is how the Electoral College actually worked to elect George Washington. Matter of fact, to elect him unanimously to be the first president of the United States. Now, with that system set up, and set it aside for a moment, just in your mind, don't think about how that description conflicts with what you may see actually happening in America today. But with that explanation already in your mind, set it aside, now let's flesh it out a little bit more. If we have these electors choosing the President of the United States for us, and they're chosen by state legislatures, how many electors does each state get to appoint? There's a formula provided for this in the Constitution, again in Article 2, Section 1. It says that the electors for each state will be equivalent to the numbers of senators and representatives from that state. So let's diagram this out. The number of electors is equivalent to the number of representatives that a state has, plus the number of senators in that state, then give us the number of electors. Now, this does not mean that the electors actually are the representatives and senators from that state. It just means that they're the same number of people. So let's take a particular state as an example. Say the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia has 14 people in the House of Representatives. It has 2 senators, just like every other state. So the state of Georgia would get to appoint a total of 16 electors to participate in the Electoral College to then choose the President of the United States. So we can then use this formula to figure out how many total electors there are. For the country as a whole, there are 435 members of the House of Representatives, 100 members of the United States Senate. So the number of electors that would be appointed for the whole country. Now remember, these electors are not the representatives and senators. They're just the same number of people. So the number of electors for the whole country using this formula would be 535 electors to get together to choose the President of the United States. But there's one adjustment that's been made to this by a constitutional amendment. The 23rd Amendment, passed in 1961, allows the District of Columbia, where Washington, D.C. is, to also elect electors, or I should say, to choose electors. The number of electors that D.C. gets cannot be more than the least populous state. So today, the state with the least population is Wyoming. Wyoming gets a single representative, and they get 2 senators, so Wyoming gets 3 electors. So Washington, D.C. gets 3 electors. We need to add that into our formula for the total number of electors in the country. So now all the presidential electors includes the 435 from the House, the 100 from the Senate, and then those 3 extra from Washington, D.C. So it's actually 538 electors that choose the President of the United States. Here's how they're distributed around the country. You can see on the left side of this map, the state of California, with the largest population in the country, gets 55 electors. Because remember, the number of electors is tied into the number of representatives, which is tied into population. The state with the second most electors is Texas. And then you can see in the Northern Plains a collection of states that only have 3 electors: Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota. Now this map is also color-coded for those states that have gained electors and those that have lost electors. The reason that states gain and lose electors is because, remember, the number of electors a state has is equivalent to the number of senators and representatives. And every 10 years, as you learned previously in this course in Unit 4 about Congress, every 10 years there's a census held. And based on that census, the seats in the House of Representatives are reapportioned. So states that have relatively gained more population will get more seats, and those that relatively have gained less population will get fewer seats. So the states that gained population and therefore gained representatives also gain electors, and the states that lose representatives lose electors. So how does a candidate actually win the Electoral College when these 538 decide to vote for president? The Constitution says that the person receiving a majority of the whole number of electors appointed will become the President of the United States. So with 538 electors, we divide that number in half. That's 269. 269 electoral votes get you exactly to 50%. That's not a majority. You need one more. So the candidate that gets 270 electoral votes is the one who is elected President of the United States. Let's review what we learned in this lesson about the Electoral College. How old must a president be? Does the president have to be at least 25 years old, or 30 years old, or 35 years old, or 40 years old? The Constitution says that a president must be at least 35 years old. They want a person with a certain amount of experience in life before they could become president. Who elects the president according to the Constitution? Is it the people? Is it the United States Senate? Is it state legislatures? Or is it the Electoral College? It's the Electoral College that elects the President of the United States. Who are the electors supposed to be? Are they randomly selected voters? Are they the wisest people in a state? Are they people loyal to a particular candidate? Or are they the senators and representatives from that state? The correct answer is the wisest people in a state. Remember, that was the goal behind the Electoral College, as explained by Alexander Hamilton. It was a way to select the people most able to make a complicated decision like this. How many votes are needed to win the Electoral College? Is it a majority of the electors appointed? Or must it be a unanimous vote of the electors? Is it the most electoral votes, whatever the number may be, or is it 3/4 of the 535? The Constitution says that to win the Electoral College, the candidate needs a majority of the electors appointed. That completes this completes this lesson, not this unit, not yet. The next lesson from Unit 5 will be Lesson 9, about winner takes all.